According to science and studies that have been replicated over 25 years, over and over and over again, we can create a world where our children don't have to suffer from chronic diseases, addictions, and mental illnesses or crime as much as we do. We can create a world where poverty and homelessness are a thing of the past. And in this video, I'm going to share with you the neurobiology of how we can do this and how we can start doing it right now. Hi, I'm Funda Yılmaz. I'm an industrial designer and founder of BLC. I'm here to share with you some of the items, studies that I linked below. If you can't have time, if you can't find time to read all of them, just take a look at the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, and there's a video link there as well for 19-minute overview by the people who actually designed and implemented the study. It's very telling. The study was done on 17,000 people by Kaiser Permanente and CDC. It's a very serious study that has been replicated over and over for 25 years now. And the researchers identified 10 different categories of chronic stressors that kids might experience. Physical, emotional, sexual abuse or neglect, a caregiver who abandons the child for reason of divorce or death, and a caregiver who's struggling with addictions, a caregiver who's got untreated mental illnesses, a caregiver or a family member who's been incarcerated. And they found that if you had 4 different types of chronic stressors. I call them toxicities because our organism really doesn't distinguish between emotional stress or physical stress, environmental contaminant, for example, air pollution, and emotional abuse, and bacterial infection that is really severe and lasts for a very long time. For our organism, they're all the same. They're all things that push it beyond its ability to cope. And so if you have 4 toxicities, your likelihood to use injection drugs increase 4,600%. And your likelihood, your risk of abusing alcohol increases 700%. Your risk of being hospitalized for an autoimmune disorder like lupus or arthritis increases 250%. Risk of suicide increases 300%. And so it goes on and on like this. And in later studies that were done on populations that were incarcerated, they found that 9 or more adversities were linked to family violence, perpetration of family violence, and sexual assault. With children, in school children, researchers found that if you were a girl who had 4 or more adversities in your life, your likelihood to become a bully perpetrator, so victim of bully and perpetrator of bullying, increased 350%. If you're a boy, the likelihood, the risk increased 450%. So this is a major impact on our risk of contracting any of these diseases of our time. And so imagine that we're able to decrease these toxicities in our lives, in our children's lives. Imagine the kind of world that we can create for them. The how much less they would have to deal with conflict and mental illness related suffering in their workplace, in their homes, in their schools, and what they would redirect their energy on, because we spend so much energy and time trying to recover from the damage of these experiences that we don't really utilize half of our full potential to create new solutions to problems of our lives, to explore our organisms, to explore our environment, our world, and the universe around us. These all require energy, and if you're too busy thinking about how to respond to a bully in your workplace, you're not going to be doing any of these things. And our children, one generation from now, that's 20 years, can have a completely different world to live in, and they can create God knows what, and that's exciting to me. So check out the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, and I promise you'll be inspired. Another study that I recommend is Elizabeth Blackburn's Nobel Prize winning experiment, where she discovered that adults who experience chronic stress for a long period of time are very likely to have their gene expression change, their telomeres shorten, and their lifespan decreases on the average of 20 years. That's major. What would you do if you could live 20 more years and live those years without all the chronic diseases that get us into locked up in our homes, in our beds, where you'd be not only living more, but you'd be enjoying life more. You'd be loving, and you'd be traveling, you'd be actually spending the money that you've earned all your life working. And that's a very beautiful possibility for people who are older like me. And so I want to start by sharing with you what I know about the mechanism through which all these impact us, so that you really feel how they apply to everyday life, how all this applies to your experience. Our stress response system is what causes all of the havoc that leads to these diseases. And our stress response system is actually very simple. A lot of you know it as only the adrenaline rush and the quickening of our heart rate and our breath becoming shallow and faster. Parts of our brain shut down. I'm sure you've heard that phrase before. But really, we don't discuss the implications of these changes in our organism and the breadth of all the changes that go on. It's not just about the chemistry of our organism that's changing. Our complete functioning style changes. The way we perceive the world, our place in the world changes, our metabolism changes, our energy level changes, and that's part of the reason why people who do all they can to lose weight, eat healthy, exercise, continue to gain weight, because their metabolism is shifting due to stress response arousal. And so to help you see the changes and how easily we can shift them back, I want to share with you a video of an anchor man getting jumped on by a lizard while he's holding a snake. So if you have a thing about lizards and snakes, you might not want to watch this, or get your coping tools with you while you're doing it. The fascinating thing is the anchor goes from the freeze response to fight response to flight response, and then uses a lot of the natural stress relievers our organism has to relieve that stress, and soothes himself and calms down at the end of 1 minute. So our organism is able to, when the threat is gone, our organism can release the stress in less than a minute. What happens with everyone out there, including myself, is we're bombarded by many different types of stressors every day, all the time, in many different ways. Stress adds up. If you look at this chart, you're going to see that there's a death line. That's when we have no stress. We need stress. It's a good thing. We learn through stress too. And even when we're sleeping, we have a little bit of stress. And as we wake up, our energy rises, our stress levels rise. And when it gets too much, our organism automatically finds a way, one of our coping mechanisms, stress relief mechanisms, to lower that stress, taking a deep breath, stretching, and looking at the pictures of your loved one, and dreaming. Sometimes daydreaming can be a stress reliever. Every single one of us are unique in the ways that we do this. And after a while, something else happens and the stress increases. And because our organism doesn't really differentiate between stressors, the reason stress increases could be a toxic employee in our workplace. It could be our children acting up. It could be noise that around us that's activating the stress response. Noise actually has a lot of impact on us. We're really not aware of it. And it could be some other thing that happens abruptly, and they add up to a level where we feel the need to release them again. And if you look at the chart, the final hill over there goes all the way up and then falls straight down. That's the kind of fall that you experience when you lower your stress level with something exceptionally powerful. It could be a really loved exercise. It could be a drug that you're using. In this case, the stress is very high and the energy level is high and the low is very steep. I would say it could be opiates or benzos that the person used. And all of a sudden, from very fidgety and high levels of energy, by the way, stress response systems are very entwined with our energy systems. And normally we use about 100 watts of energy. When your stress response system is fully activated, it can go all the way up to 2,100 watts of energy. And our organism finds that energy by first, it reduces all blood flow and energy flow to only the survival related organs. And then it starts eating up, destroying cells and sucking out the energy from those cells to fight whatever life or death situation that it thinks we're experiencing. And so as from that kind of a high level of energy, you suddenly become even sleepy. And that's a really steep slope right there. And that's the definition of the addictiveness of substances. How high are they going to be able to get you in how short of a time? if we can teach everyone out there how to maximize all the stress fighting tools that we have at our disposal today, natural ones, technological ones, we wouldn't experience the amount of rise that you see on that graph. And we wouldn't have to use artificial substances to get us to that low that you see there, to the normal functioning levels even. And so that means reduced addictions. And it's possible we can change our environments so that we have less stressors bothering us. So let's look at the video and watch the anchor man go from the freeze response. He falls down. I'm giving all sorts of spoilers here. He falls down, and that's because his muscle tone is completely off. And that's very natural with the freeze response. Our organism releases natural opiates, and our breathing slows, our heart rate slows. We become almost we go into kind of a hibernation mode, but we can easily rise up from that mode, as you can see with the anchor there. He knows that the threat isn't serious, and he can fight that aggressor, which is the reptile. He can find a solution for it. And so he gets into his fight mode. Fight reflex gets activated. He gets his arms open, and if you notice, his palms are open too. And he's screaming at the person who was supposed to protect him. He's angry. He wants change. And he tells the person, "Why did you not tell me this thing jumped?" And he wants the reptile off, and he wants a solution right there, right then. His energy is so high, he's constantly moving around, if you notice, and he's also starting to use some self-soothing stress release tools that our organism has built in every single one of us. Try to find those yourself, and then we can talk about them when the video is over.
Close to 5 feet. Texas rat snakes are going to be one of the largest snakes that you find in the Metroplex area. What the Get this thing off me, man. Get this thing off me, man. God dang. What is this thing jumping at me for, man? He likes you. Yeah, I can tell, man. All right, let's try to get back under control. You didn't tell me the thing jumped. Well, God dang. Okay, let's try to get our composure here.
So interesting, right? And imagine that your organism is constantly going into that freeze response. Your energy is constantly low, and you have to work, you have to network, you have to do things adults do. So to be able to do that, we resort to whatever means we have available around us. And very often they're substances that have really bad side effects and cause addictions. Sometimes we resort to gambling. Sometimes we resort to sex addictions. Whatever gets us to be able to function, we will use it because we're human. Wouldn't you do whatever it takes to get yourself out of a very painful situation so that you can continue with your life? It's the same thing. When we remove these stressors from our lives, or at least decrease them, we won't need to use addictions to cope with the stressors. And there are actually studies that that show us that that might just be the case. Vietnam veterans, everybody thought that 20% of the veterans were addicted to opiates. This is actually a survey done back in the time, and everyone was afraid in the United States mainland. What will we do when these people come back home and they're all addicts? And will we put them to jail? Will we put them to treatment? And what happened was, when veterans returned home, they found lowered stress levels, and they quit their addictions.